there's some other very cool things about it. I want to talk about the one that we talked about in the design curriculum, which had to do with accumulating specific currency to insert things into the backdrop, which in many cases could be functional situations later,
right,
or at least components thereof. I actually, how am I going to put this too? Boy, I'm just obnoxious tonight. I don't see why that was so hard. You really struggled over that, in the talk, and then, and then you've written it up really carefully, like you're explaining it to somebody who just cannot fathom it. And I'm kind of looking at it going, but this looks easy and fun.
Right.
So, it's kind of a good design comment. I was just wanted to point out to you that you just seemed really, really fraught about it for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of goes back to the table culture that you were talking about, and my early formative experiences did not have a lot to do with players having any say over the continuing world or setting. So maybe that's my own experiences coming in. Like, I want to make sure everyone understands that this is a possibility.
Right. Well, it's well done. I mean, it says what it is, and that's great. I think it would be a very, very functional thing, and it fits very beautifully with the whole point of play. All right, well, let's take a look then at the points which lead into that. And I want to work my way kind of reverse processing. So say I've got the points, tension points, I believe. Unless I'm... Okay. So tension points, and I have some, and I'm going to clarify that Bob's gas station is now a going concern. Particularly, for some reason, it's important to me. And so we're all, getting pretty soon, one of us is going to come in with a sketch map of Bob's gas station, at this point. Well, let's back it up a little bit. How did I get those points?
So you would get those points by being placed into a situation like I described with the crises, although I guess I need to rethink those a little bit. And or if you felt like in the course of play you felt moved to use an ethic that was one of your conflicted ethics, one of the ones that's opposite of your chosen ethics, and in so doing you gain ethical tension, basically. That's why I tried to set up the crises to be posed by the game master of like, here's the issue, and you can either like do the thing that would fulfill your ethic and lose whatever you were going for, whatever you wanted, you lose that. Or you could choose to not do what your ethic would demand and continue to do what you were going to do.
Okay. First of all, you're proposing that the hero is already in a situation where abiding by their stated ethos would mean not getting what they're trying to do.
Right.
And I'm already having a little bit of trouble manufacturing that in my head. If my character is very big on being anti-authoritarian.
Right.
And there is a ruckus going on. And I don't want to make a joke out of it. Let's actually have a relatively reasonable situation where one of the protesters has fallen while being herded. You know how the police herd people, with their shield lines?
Kettling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they're kettling and one person fell. And you can see that the police are actually, not ceasing in their formation and walking right over the person.
Right.
So I believe I mentioned in the past that I'm talking now about Plasma Lass. Plasma Lass is going to get down there, and being anti-authoritarian is perfectly happy to break up the formation of the police officers in the context of swooping down and grabbing that person. And so, first and foremost, I want to make sure that person doesn't get trampled. And as part of that, considering that I'm plasmalast and can land in a huge burst of released quantum energies in every which way, I plan to do precisely that and make these officers basically not able to continue in their Kepling activity.
Mhm.
So, I'm not seeing how I have a choice of that kind. It seems to me as though my anti-authoritarianism is being nicely indulged by precisely the acts that I want to accomplish. And that I, as a player, would be actually pretty determined to state actions of that kind.
Right.
And that if you, as the GM, were more or less in the position of constantly having to say, if you nail the officers and fulfill your ethos, she's going to get trampled. Can't do it. Which way you want to go?
Right.
Can you imagine yourself actually having to jury rig every stated action by each player throughout play? Not only that, but each player doing so with different axes all the time. And can you imagine being a player feeling as though your character's stated action, which on the face of it, in my opinion, isn't a particularly, needs to be problematized statement of action.
Right.
But somehow basically the GM is in there basically as a, no, you're a loser. Everything you do, it's going to go bad one way or the other. It's kind of Peter Parker as the endless Charlie Brown. It has been sort of an on-off thing through the history of Spider-Man.
Right.
And frankly, when he's written like that, people stop buying the book. It's depressing, annoying, and unpopular. The only thing that kept Spider-Man going through the 70s was Marvel Team-Up, where he was written much more positively.
Gotcha.
Well, the thing I'm really going for here is is what then are we doing with statements, and do we have to really get into these sort of meta-parsed analyses of any heroic action that I'd like to make? And I'm actually rather looking forward to Plasmalast going down there and, blowing up the police officers and coming up out of there with the trampling victim in her arms.
Right.
And this is what she does. And if that's not what she does, then that's not who I wanted to play when I picked her and chose those axes.
Right. Well, that was kind of why I feel like that sort of setup, and I wouldn't want crises if I do keep them. I'm not married to using them, but I like the idea of being able to set up these sorts of dilemmas. But if Plasmalast was a hero who also had the means ethic, I feel like that could be an interesting dilemma, because it would be, the dilemma would be you want to break up the police officers, but if you do so, you will hurt this protester. You can choose either to go ahead and do it, and in which case you'll violate the means, which is your ethic, or you can go ahead and forfeit your beat and choose not to do that because she might get hurt, or you could overcome the beat to both knock the police officers out of the way and save her because you're a police hero. I'm not a police hero. Superhero, and you can do that stuff sometimes.
Right, but then why wouldn't I just overcome every time?
Because you get a significant detriment to your attempt to do what you're trying to do, is the answer.
The answer is that overcoming is basically too hard.
It's harder, yeah.
Right.
You roll with your conflicted ethic instead of your primary.
Mm-hmm. What I guess I'm saying is that I find the processing of it all worthy of review.
Yeah, definitely.
Do we really want to undergo this? Particularly because getting the tension points and then putting them into play as things that have changed the world, I mean, it's a little bit confusing to understand. I mean, clearly we're just going to throw causality out, which I guess is okay. that it doesn't matter what I do or how this goes with this protester, but now I have a tension point that I can stick into the setting somewhere.
Right.
And I suppose, the way we talked about it before is that it would be causal somehow, that that somehow it would reflect, or even symbolically reflect the outcome of whatever happened during that scene.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's impossible, but I am saying that it is. It has a labored quality to it.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Yeah.
I would certainly like to develop something more emergent, but I'm really interested in scenes that pit characters' ethics against themselves. Like
I
the mean
completely
person,
get
the
that.
autonomy.
Yeah, I completely get that. But I think that what you are falling into slightly is a bit of a zero-sum trade-off. It could be made somewhat more simple by saying, look, here's the situation. You've got, this person being trampled. You've got the police there. You want to go in and do like both these things. And there's a couple of ways to go. One you could say is, look, son of a bitch, just pick one.
Right.
You can't have both. Just pick one. Quit double dipping and just pick one. Whichever it is that you want to accomplish. If you... there's a couple of different ways. This is just off the cuff, and I'm not even really suggesting it. If you want to do both, you're going to have to succeed at both. And if you fail at one and succeed at the other, the other one is going to be really fucking hammered. She's going to be crippled.
Right.
Or, the police are going to reform after you rescue her and do something terrible to the protesters when they catch up with them because they're pissed now.
Right.
Something like that. And that way, you don't have to... you're preserving the ability to double dip. It's harder to succeed at both than it is to succeed at one or the other, statistically, by definition.
Right.
And you've got your consequences built in, and perhaps you just, whenever you have a situation like that, you just are going to get a tension point.
Right.
You're just going to get one. And then you look at what happened in the scene and you do something accordingly, when you get a moment to think about it. And that way, do you see how that's just a little bit, I'm not sure if I'm saying exactly why I see that as so much simpler.
Right.
Than the way that I see it written right now. For one thing, you don't need a whole move to overcome. I mean, I've eliminated the need for a move to overcome, because overcome just means succeeding in both as a simultaneous action.
Right.
So does that, but it also provides the character with the full range. In a way, I kind of see, if you are come down heavy on one side of, the authority to anti-authority axis. If you come down heavy on one side, it's like some small part of you sees all the way to the end of the other. You kind of get the problem. You're like, the enemy, if you will, ideologically speaking. Well, what that means is that you are perfectly capable of operating and up and down that entire axis. You're just bad at the other side. And so, to me, I like the idea that I can have my character do my characteristic comfort zone morality on the situation. My character could kind of reach over and, just this once do the other side thing. Nobody's looking.
Yeah.
But it's the best way to go with this situation. Or they can try to have it both ways.
Right.
And I think that captures this without the GM having to set up anything except to just keep an eye out in the moment for situations that are, messy. with a lot of moving parts. And so all the GM really has to do is to make sure that there's a lot of moving parts in any situation. Sooner or later, you know, the dog's running this way and the kid's running that way and the house is burning down that way.
Yeah.
And it's not very hard to sort of identify those moments. And you don't have to set them up, I guess is what I'm saying. The way you were thinking of it before was that, or saying it before, was that you actually had to kind of set up the crisis and kind of like
I wanted to do
land
something
the
that,
hero in it, you know?
Yeah, that the narrator could kind of just pose them sometimes, and it's definitely a messy thing. But it speaks more to a design goal than like me thinking that particular setup was a very good system.
Right. But at this point, I mean, I guess I'm saying that maybe the issue is that maybe a little less design rather than more is suitable, because I could be wrong, but I kind of feel as though in the history of my role playing and game mastering that identifying a situation as having that kind of crisscrossing problem isn't very hard either to identify, or in the midst of play saying, aha, right then is when this happens. And that it's sort of an ongoing job of the GM to kind of keep that knob ready to up the gain on at any given moment.
Yeah.
If it feels forced, don't do it. If, on the other hand, the whole situation just kind of begs for it, do it.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a scene in The Death of Superman where he has like an inner monologue about how he has to keep fighting Doomsday even though he can hear the people like burning to death in the building, and if he stops, that Doomsday's going to get away and kill more people, but so he has to let them die, and he makes the choice between the many and the few. And I really liked that dilemma, but I think that it emerges very clearly from the situation already, which is Doomsday has rampaged. And I mean, it would probably require a little bit of massaging from the narrator, saying, "Well, you can hear with your super hearing that they're in this burning building," but it emerges from what already happened, I guess, in a more.
Not only that, but there is sort of there's sort of an interesting question in the context of group play in particular. One has to come up with quite a bit of contrivance to keep one's buddies from saving the people in the burning building.
Yes, that's true.
And it also has a lot of contrivance in terms of what there isn't. I mean, the many, I suppose, is everybody, and the few are the people in the burning building. Is that the idea? The trouble is that it's not a trade-off. You don't save the few and then watch the many die. You let Doomsday go on, and these few are going to get it anyway. You know, later. He's not. How am I going to put it? Again, whenever we look for an example in the stories of this dilemma, he doesn't really get to go save the people in the burning building and then they're okay. Not if Doomsday is still going.
Right.
Doomsday's not just going to go on and kill everybody else. These guys are going with him either way.
Yeah, and he does ultimately end up in the parlance that I've used so far, overcoming, because he forces Doomsday into the mud and then goes and saves him.
They always do. I mean, they always do. It's never... they never actually have to face the dilemma. So it is the issue I'm trying to get at, though, is the degree of contrivance necessary to have the hero you can get what you want, but you have to go against your morality, is a very, very tricky thing to have to contrive, because what the hero wants is usually in tune with their morality anyway. So it's only when the player says, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go off morality now. I'm going to go off axis now.
Mm.
Or when you're able to sort of spot an opportunity for an axis conflict just in the moment. And although that sounds iffy, to me actually sounds like the most reliably successful in comparison.
Yeah, the most interesting one that happened was actually, I didn't set up intentionally, but one of the players had the order, or had order versus autonomy.
Right.
And a bunch of the other members of the group had autonomy. Some others didn't, but they ended up in conflict with some government agents, and that player had a hard time, because they're very keen to roleplay their ethics. A very hard time of being like, well, I want to help my friends, but also I don't feel comfortable going against the established institutions that I trust.
The example seems to support my point, though, which is that the best ones of these actually just are right there in front of your face,
right,
as play proceeds, and less. It's less important to make it happen.
Right.
Sort of prep your.
And you can, and I feel like by virtue of including that situation, I was providing all the fuel that was necessary.
Right. And for all you know, the way things went, maybe it wouldn't have quite turned into as trenchant a choice for the hero, but they don't all have to.
Yeah.
And when they do, I mean, that's great. I mean, we can't have, operatic character challenge,
right,
every minute.
Right. No, that would be overwhelming.